Okay, guys, so happy to be with you. This is our third week that we're starting together. It's been an amazing first 2 weeks since we launched Sion, and I can't tell you how much gratitude I have for the people who have helped put this together. Literally every single person is needed. I'm sure in other organizations and companies, they say that to their employees so they feel good about themselves. But in truth, this is really a very small organization. And every single person has contributed exactly what we need in order to put these classes together and to get them out to you guys. And really, it's a miracle. I'm not just saying that. So I just want to thank everybody who's been a part and you guys for listening, having this interaction with you every week and to try and work on these ideas and to try to search for something deeper in our life is a very unique opportunity that even though everybody's at home right now because of the virus, even still, you'd be surprised how much little has changed, meaning within the home, and it's kind of just like same day, but whatever we can do at home. So this is an amazing opportunity that Hashem is giving us to kind of look deeper and to try and figure out when I come out of this, how can I improve my life? How can I improve my family's life? How can I get closer to who I really am? So we'll start like this. Everyone wants redemption, whether it's redemption that's collective global redemption, whether it's a personal redemption, whether it's redemption from physical illness or redemption from mental health illness, redemption from relationship issues, redemption from children who go off in a way that you didn't anticipate and it's hurting you, redemption from anything. So every person in this world, Jewish, not Jewish, wants redemption from something, okay? What is the key to experiencing that redemption? How do we practically begin our own individual process of redemption from whatever these problems that are plaguing us are, or if it's collective even, let's say from this plague that we're dealing with right now that is transcontinental, if that's the right word, that we're dealing with a virus that has come over the entire world. This is also something we need to be redeemed from. So this teaching that we're going to learn tonight, which is very important and very deep and very practical, applies both to each of us individually and collectively. If any of us watching, and I'm sure it's everyone, has a problem that they're dealing with, you want redemption from that problem. How do we actually do that? How do we start that process? Now, Chassidut and Kabbalah, they explain that for redemption to take place, whether on an individual level or a collective level, there has to be two main players, two key processes that take place, a start and a finish. The start, according to Chassidut and Kabbalah, and according to the Gemara, is called Mashiach Ben Yosef. The finish and the second stage, the second Redeemer, is called Mashiach Ben David. So even though when we have learned about these things in the past, and most people have only heard about Mashiach, period, not many people know that there's actually, according to the Torah, there's going to be two Redeemers, not just one, just like Moshe and Aaron took the Jewish people out of Egypt thousands of years ago. So too, that set the precedent that in the future, we would also have two Mashiachs. One of them is called Mashiach Ben Yosef, the son of Yosef. One of them is called Mashiach Ben David, the son of David. Okay. Now, even though those are going to be physical people, normal human beings who happen to reach a very high level, both physically and spiritually, we understand that in fact, they represent two processes. And each of us actually has an access to ourselves, these two processes, and you need to tap into your Mashiach Ben Yosef and your Mashiach Ben David within yourself in order to redeem from any of your personal problems. So meaning this is not just a collective issue. The fact that the Jews are obsessed with the fact that Mashiach is coming, the fact that non-Jews are obsessed with the fact that they think that Mashiach already came. This concept of Mashiach is not just a global concept. It is a very personal concept. And in fact, we all need Mashiach, even within our personal lives. So therefore, the first step is always Mashiach Ben Yosef. Yosef comes before David. Tonight we're going to learn why. And tonight we're going to try to connect to, practically, how could I access the Mashiach Ben Yosef within me. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do I do that? Because when you tap into that and you kick into that, that is actually the beginning of you leaving your problems. Any problem, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. Mashiach Ben Yosef is the beginning of leaving that problem. He is always the first redeemer. Where does Chassidut get the idea that there's two stages? Even though we know and the rabbis have taught that there are these two Mashiachs, is there an actual precedent in the Torah? Is there a pasuk? Is there a verse in the Torah that explains this explicitly? So in Chassidut, and Netanya explains this, there's a pasuk from Tehillim. It's in Lamed Dalet, and it says there a very famous pasuk, Sur Meira v'asei tov. Turn from negativity and pursue positivity. Turn from the negative or remove yourself from the negative, and asei tov, do good, means to pursue something positive, okay? These two Mashiachs represent these two stages. Because what was that Tehillim? What was that pasuk about? King David was teaching us, how do we experience our real selves? How do we connect to Hashem? How do we connect to the source of existence and the root of your soul? How do we experience redemption in our life? And David teaches, Sur meira v'asei tov. Turn and remove yourself from negativity and pursue and do positivity. Okay. So now we're going to learn today that turning from negativity is the first stage, and this is the essence of Mashiach Ben Yosef. That the beginning of the redemption, both globally for all of us that we're all waiting for, and on a personal level, is to turn and to extract yourself from negativity. So we're going to learn exactly really what that means and how to practically do that. And we know that despite the fact that there are two different Mashiachs, Mashiach Ben Yosef always comes first. So we need to understand tonight, why is it so important that Mashiach Ben Yosef has to come before Mashiach Ben David? What is it about him that he has to start the process? Why can't he finish the process? Why does David have to finish the process? So now, interestingly, we are in a process now called Sfirat HaOmer. For anyone who doesn't know, this is a 7-week process where the Jewish people are required by the sages to do inner work, which is amazing because this process actually fell out right during the coronavirus. Meaning we had to do this anyway, and usually every year it's very hard to do any inner work, and we just like look up a nice cute quote and then we feel good about it, and the next day comes, we don't change. And now we've had 7 weeks now to actually work on different qualities, different midot, different attributes of our soul. So every week since we started, Tzion, 2 weeks ago, we did different qualities. This week we started a brand new quality. This is the 6th of the 7 weeks. So these last 2 weeks, we're going to work on these two qualities. They are called Yesod and Malchut. Yesod has to do with Sur Meira, to turn away from negativity. That's this week. This is the work of this week, that every Jew has a special ability to disconnect himself from negative influences, things that are bogging you down, things that are taking you away from what you want to be, things that are blocking your ability to experience happiness, from experiencing connection, from experiencing love, from experiencing peace. That's called Yesod. And the simple explanation of Yesod that we can all connect to, Yesod is the Tzaddik. Tzaddik is a person who reaches the highest level of spiritual and physical mastery. Right? In other cultures, they might call this you might call this a spiritual guru, right? Somebody might call it a monk in another religion. But in Judaism, to reach the highest level of spiritual and physical mastery, that's called the Tzaddik. Now, in the Torah, it's taught, there's a pasuk that says that Yisrael is kulam tzaddikim. Every Jew is a tzaddik. This is an explicit pasuk in the Torah, that every single Jew is a tzaddik. So that means that every single one of us has a special ability, who's listening to this class, to actually actualize this part of you that's called tzaddik. that you yourself can be a physical and spiritual master, an emotional master, a psychological master of your own life. No matter what you've been through, no matter what your experience is, no matter what you're presently going through now, there is a part of every Jew's soul which is called Yesod. This is called the point that is the Tzaddik within you. And this week we have a special ability to connect to this point within ourselves. Next week, we're going to discuss Malchut. Malchut is the last quality of the Jewish soul. It's the final quality of the Jewish soul. And this is connected not to Yosef, but to David. Now you'll notice, what did we say before? There's two Mashiachs. There's Mashiach Ben Yosef and there's Mashiach Ben David. There's turn away from negativity and there is pursue positivity. You'll notice that the last 2 weeks are these processes. Because in order for these two Mashiachs to come, they actually represent the last 2 stages of history. So just like within our soul, they are the final 2 qualities of your own personal soul, they are also the final 2 stages of history. This last stage, which we're going to focus on next week, is called Mashiach Ben David, which has to do with prayer. It has to do with talking to Hashem. It has to do with speech, and it has to do with action, doing something, okay? However, before you can get to David, and this is something that many people don't know, in order to even connect to your Malchut, the part of you that's called Mashiach Ben David, which actually not only removes you from negativity, but transforms your whole life to good, and transforms the whole world to good. And this is the reason why most people only know about Mashiach Ben David, because we know he's the one who's going to transform the whole world. However, in truth, he's only able to do that because of Mashiach Ben Yosef. And within us personally, when we want to transform our lives, which is the concept of David, you can only do that next week by accessing this week and working on this week, this quality of Yosef within you, the Tzaddik within you. Now, this concept of negativity that we're talking about, we're going to get explicit about what that is. Now, this is a very soft topic. Rabbi Nachman speaks about what the tzaddik, what is the essence of the tzaddik, what is the essence of your inside being a spiritual master, to be a psychological master, to be an emotional master. What do you actually have to do to achieve that? So this is a soft topic because according to society, what the Torah teaches in this area is not good for you. Not only is it not good for you, according to the deeper teachings, it's actually cutting you off from all blessing in your life. So in secular society, it's actually, not only is it okay, doctors actually recommend it. And they say, if you don't do it, it's not healthy for you, okay? So therefore, anybody who's listening to this class, whether you've heard teachings like this before or you have not, whether you've heard it this way or you haven't, my way to teach about these things, I am not into gloom and doom. I don't believe in that. I don't think it's effective. I think people cut you short when they just try and scare you about things, and it's not the way. It's not my way for sure. Okay, that's not what you're going to get here. My approach and the way that I believe is to empower. My whole life, I've always believed this, and when I became a social worker, it became very clear to me. It's much easier to affect the change in your life when you are pursuing a goal, not when you're trying to get away from something bad, right? Like for instance, the example I always give people is, let's say someone comes to therapy and they have an alcohol issue. And I say to him, you have an alcohol problem. You know it's killing you, right? You know that it's causing issues with your family and it's stopping you from having a job and living a normal life in society and all the things that you want. Stop drinking. It's killing you. So that person might stop for a day, but he's not going to stop forever. Because the next time he has a stressful moment in his life, the next time he goes through a difficulty, he's going to drink again. What's the reason? Because he doesn't know who he is. He's just trying to stop a negative behavior. And when you're confronted with the stress of life, the obstacles of life, we're not able to overcome that desire to do that thing. So what did I see when I did therapy? What did I see in myself when I got therapy? What did I see in the Torah world, in Judaism, in life, just period, with everything? That when you are actually shooting for your highest self, you can succeed. When you feel empowered, you can succeed. Whereas instead of telling that person, don't drink because it's killing you, I tell you, if you don't drink, you know what you could be? Do you know how smart you are? Do you know how emotionally capable you are? Do you know how creative you are? Do you know how successful you would be if you didn't drink? Now, I had much more success as a person who never did therapy in my whole life when I started working with people who had been getting therapy for, not exaggerating, 50 years, simply because I was pushing them towards a positive goal and not focusing on what they weren't doing. Okay? And the Torah teaches the same thing, and Chassidut says that this is the only way. Show them their greatest self, and they're going to want to do it. You don't have to convince them, okay? So therefore, we're going to be speaking about this topic. Rabbi Nachman speaks about this specific topic more than anybody in the Torah, even within the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters, where they all know how important it is. Rabbi Nachman still talks about more than anybody because it's a very sensitive topic, okay? However, we are going to discuss it because it's very important. But before we get there, we need to understand some basic fundamentals about what we're going to talk about. Rabbi Nachman says this concept of tzaddik, or for a woman, it's called tzaddikah. For you to connect to this part within you, which is your highest self, you have to do sur meirah, turn away from negativity. Any forces, any barriers which are concealing you from Hashem, which are concealing you from experiencing blessing and goodness in your life and peace within your relationships, that's all called sur meirah, turning away from negativity. So on paper, this is very hard to do. And Rabbi Nachman actually says it's the hardest test for any person. For any man to become a tzaddik, it's the hardest thing to do. For a woman to become a tzaddikah, it's the hardest thing to do. However, we have a precedent to understand that it's possible for all of us. Where do we learn that from? The answer is that within the Torah, we have discussed in the past that for every quality that we're working on, there's a specific person in the Torah who most exemplifies that quality. Last week, we spoke about the quality of hod, gratitude. That was represented by Aaron, who was always responding to life with silence and gratitude, with surrender. The week before that, which was the beginning of Tzion that we started, we worked on Moshe Rabbeinu's quality, Moshe. And what was his? It was boldness. It was courageousness. It was not giving up. So it was an opposite quality to Aaron. This week, we're talking about tzaddik, attaining your highest self, spiritually, physically, emotionally, psychologically. Who is the archetype? Who is the main example that is given in the Torah for this? That is Joseph, okay? Yosef was one of 12 sons and one of 13 children. The last child that they had was a daughter, Dinah. This was Yaakov's children, okay? Yaakov had 4 wives. He had 13 children. 12 of them were boys. One of them was a girl. One of the final ones that he had, his name was Yosef. Now, Yosef was very different than his brothers. Besides the fact that he was the youngest, he was simply different than them. They were very conventional. They were very traditional. They heard what their father said, and they did it. Yosef also heard what his father said, and he actually connected to it in a deeper way than his brothers, but he took it in a complete different direction than any of the brothers anticipated. As Rashi explains, he was even flamboyant, okay? His whole behavior was eccentric. He almost was like, his behavior was like a little child, even as he was growing up, very naive, very innocent. And as a result of this, as a kid, he was bullied by his brothers. They didn't hang out with him. He ended up hanging out with the maidservants' children because he connected to them more. And even they had something against him as well. So everybody had something against Yosef. And Yosef himself was part of the problem, even though he didn't necessarily have bad intentions. He only had good intentions. He told them dreams that he had as a little kid about how one day he was going to be the leader of the Jewish people and that everybody was going to need him. And he told his brothers, and unsurprisingly, They didn't like it. Why? Because their father Yaakov told Judah, that he was going to be the king of the Jewish people. And Yosef's dreams made it sound like he thought he was going to be. So he could be the whole reason that the Jewish mission was going to be derailed even very early on. That our ability to reveal the light of godliness in the world, to lift up the world, to bring peace and to bring truth, it was all hinging on Yaakov, Jacob's children. And they all had the same idea about how that would go, except for Yosef. As a result of that, Yosef was actually put into a pit, okay? The brothers who hated him, says explicitly, they couldn't talk to him because they hated him so much. They put him in a pit. And they said to themselves, let's see what happens to his dreams now. So now we're talking about great people. We're not just talking about jealous brothers. We're talking about some of the greatest human beings who ever lived. So the fact that they put him in a pit means that they really thought he was not just a threat to their status as people, but as a threat to the world. That like many false leaders who have come after him, he was going to bring a lot of destruction with his ideas about what would be. What ended up happening is he became a slave. Yishmaelim, they took him out. He was actually sold 4 times. And then he finally ended up in a country called Mitzrayim. Now, many people know that the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt for over 200 years. And they don't realize that the whole beginning of that was simply because Yosef happened to be sold there through 4 different means and eventually living in Mitzrayim. And he was a slave there. What did Yosef do as a slave? There was actually a head butcher there. They're not sure if he was a butcher, well, there's one opinion. Another opinion was that he actually was, he was the one who followed through with decrees by the government to administer corporal punishment. And therefore he was called a butcher in that sense as well. And he became his slave, his servant. So imagine, he went from being his father's favorite son and the one who was hated amongst his brothers, doing whatever he thought was right, even though it looked wrong, and then being sold as a slave and not seeing his family for years. And while he was there, he resisted anything he didn't believe in. To the extent that the Torah makes it very clear, he was very good looking. He wasn't normally good looking. He was so good looking that when he got to Mitzrayim, the women, they used to, specifically when they saw him come by, they used to look through the walls of their fences to be able to get a look at him because he was so good looking, okay? So it wasn't just like he was a regular person, and we're going to see in a moment that he had sexual advances on him, but he actually happened to be the best looking person in the history of the Torah, to the extent that he's the only person in the history of the Torah whose beauty is compared to a woman. Because the Torah teaches that out of all the degrees of beauty that Hashem brought to the world, 9/10 went to women. That let's say you had 100% beauty was brought down to the world, Hashem gave 90% of that beauty to women. And Yosef's beauty was so beautiful, it was compared to a woman's. Okay? Now, while he was a servant, his master actually happened to be homosexual. A lot of people didn't know that. And his wife was very attracted to Yosef. So as he was a slave there for a long time, she made advances on him for a whole year. And every day, the Midrash explains, it got more and more intense. And Yosef withstood it every single day for a whole year. Now imagine any of us. Your brothers hate you. You haven't seen your dad for years. You're a slave. That you went from being the child who was the favorite of the father, looking like you might be the leader of the whole Jewish people, to go to a country where the culture is completely opposite and antithetical to everything you believe in, and you're now a slave and you don't know when you're going to leave. And you have a beautiful woman who's seducing you every day. Who doesn't do that? Who doesn't follow through with that? And Yosef, every day he refused. And what did he say? He said, how can I do that to my master? Meaning, even his master, he said that even though he owed him nothing, he said, how can I do that to him? He put me in charge of his house. That's how he thought. My master put me in charge of this house. I'm the one who's taking care of all of his stuff. And now he's not home and I'm going to do this with you? That's wrong. So what's that point inside of Yosef called? That's called the Tzaddik. Because on paper, it doesn't make sense that he doesn't follow through with this. Because every reason society, every reason in the world, emotionally, psychologically should be, he should because he has nothing else to do. What else is there to live for? At least get some pleasure. And in his mind, he said, I can't, because that would be wrong. That's called being a tzaddik. The epitome of a tzaddik is that you can be in a culture that's completely antithetical to yours, and you continue to fulfill what you believe is true in your heart. That's called to be a tzaddik. Now, he resisted for a year, and on the final day that she put everything on to make it happen, and she set it up that nobody would be in the house, he actually had to take off his clothes and run out of the house in order not to follow through. And she threw him into prison and claimed that he wanted to be with her, which obviously she had to do something like that at this point because it was obvious now. Everybody saw him come out of the house like that. And then as a result, he was placed into prison. So imagine how bad this is getting. He goes from being the favorite to being hated by his brothers to going to a foreign country and being sold as a slave, not seeing his family for years. Now he's a prisoner in a jail, and it's not like our jail where you can get a college degree there. It might even be better than your normal life. Their jail cells were in pits in the ground. It was like in dirt under a cave. They just put you under the ground. The breathing quality was terrible. The sanitary conditions were unbearable. That was their jail. And he was there for years, not knowing if he would ever get out. And the Midrash says there that he was able to stay happy the entire time. And he was able to keep his real self the entire time, no matter what. To the extent that he saw other people in jail who were suffering, and he would go over and ask them how they were. What's going on with you? The Lubavitcher Rebbe, he explains how deep it is that the entire redemption of Jewish people started because Yosef asked another person how he was doing. And because of that, the other person in jail told him the dream that he had. Yosef, who happened to be one of the smartest people ever lived and had incredible wisdom, which had to do with the fact that he was a tzaddik, he was able to tell him, by the way, I think your dream means this. When those people left jail, they told the leader of Egypt, who they happened to work for, that there's a Jew who's in jail. He's an Ivri, he's a Jew. And he happens to know how to interpret dreams correctly. And you have a dream, you should ask him. So now he's pulled out of jail, and he comes up to Paro, and he ends up becoming second in command to Paro when he interprets his dream correctly. And this Paro sees that this Jew, like over the course of thousands of years, in every single country that we've gone to, in every host country that we've gone to, they've seen that we're very capable, both when it comes to government, when it comes to law, when it comes to finances. And what ends up happening is that Jewish people, over the course of thousands of years, have been put in the role of viceroy, which is second in command, meaning even though no president of another country is ever Jewish, they always have people who are actually making all the decisions who are. This actually has become our stereotype over time. There's a reason for that. Yosef was the first one to actually do this. Now imagine that change of events, that whole change of events. How did that happen? How did he get to the point that he went from the worst suffering, that for 22 years he was estranged from his family, and he had every reason to be depressed, to be anxious, to be scared, to be despair and destitute, to hit the lowest lows, not to think he would ever have redemption in his life, to get to the point that he actually became the actual leader of what was the United States of America back then, Egypt, where the whole world was surrounding and revolving around that country, that when there was a famine, then every other country around there had to come to Mitzrayim, had to come to Egypt for food and drink, and he was the one in charge of giving it to everybody, meaning he became the leader of the world. How did that happen? How do you have a transformation like that? And the answer is he is the archetype of a tzaddik. That he went to Mitzrayim, he went to Egypt, where all they did there was worship Paro. They believed that a person was God. They believed that Paro was God. They believed that the river was God, because in that country, anybody who knows anything about Egypt, they're sustained only by that river. All of the water doesn't come from rain from the sky. The Gemara speaks about this in Tanit. It says that as opposed to Israel, where they're dependent on water coming from the sky in order not to have a famine, and therefore we rely on Hashem because we need rain to come, and therefore we pray all the time for rain. Mitzrayim, they don't have to pray for rain. It all comes from that river, the Nile River. And Paro himself said, I created that river. And they all believe that. So they all worship the river as the god because that was the source of their sustenance. And Yosef was completely against all of this. And on top of that, they were also engaged in many things which we now consider to be, and this is the soft topic that we're going to speak about tonight, sexually promiscuous. Things that for us in our generation are very normal. The way that I grew up, it's not only acceptable, it's encouraged. And even within that encouragement, there's actually societies of people, like almost like little secret societies of people who only live a certain way and have a certain family so that they can be involved in these things which the Torah deems sexually promiscuous and things that are not good for you, not just because Hashem says not to, but because they actually get in the way of you experiencing blessing and health and peace in your life. And they had all of that in Mitzrayim. They had all of that in Egypt. And Yosef represented the opposite of that. So the fact that Yosef could go to Egypt and to stick to what he learned when he was in Israel from his father, meaning he stuck to being a Jew even when he was in Chutz La'aretz, even when he was in exile. So because Yosef was able to do that, we now all have that ability because we have a part of our soul that's called Yosef, that's called Yesod, that's called the Tzaddik. So now for all time, every single Jew, whether you're religious or you're secular, whether you're Ashkenazi or you're Sephardic, every single one of us has a part of our soul that's called Yosef, that's called Tzaddik. And it's imprinted in each and every one of us ever since Yosef actually did this. It's the case for all of the forefathers. That whatever they went through in their life was only to give that ability to each and every one of our souls. So we need to understand now, why is it so important to turn away from negativity? Before we actually get more deeper into what the negativity is. Why is it so important to turn away from negativity? Why is that more important? Or let's say, the first step before you can achieve something positive. So to understand this, we need to understand a very deep concept in Chassidut and Kabbalah. We've spoken about this in the past, and we have to talk about it again. Everything in this world has two components. Everything in this world has what's called a klipa and a pri. Everything in this world has a shell and a fruit. That means that in your life, in your relationships, in your experiences, there's always the outer casing, the outer trapping, what everything looks like. And then within that, you have an inner life force. You have an inner reality, which is called its soul. Soul doesn't mean like, that movie Ghost I saw like 30 years ago, that there's like a little white light inside. That's not what a soul is. A soul is the inner life force, the inner essence, the inner reality that everything has, not just people, plants, animals, experiences. Everything has a body and a soul, an external and an internal. Now the Torah teaches that for us to experience goodness, blessing, happiness, peace in our life, we need to tap into the inner and use the outer only as a means to experience the inner. For instance, practically, let's say you're eating food right now, or you're about to have dinner, or you're having dinner. Now the food that you're looking at or the drink that you're drinking, there is the outer aspect of it, which is the food itself, whatever. It's a potato, it's a piece of steak, it's a Coca-Cola, whatever it is. Now, when you drink that or you eat that, that has life force in it. That gives you nourishment. That's why doctors say that you want to eat healthy food because it has inner life force, which gives you nourishment. Therefore, you need to be careful about what you eat and drink. Okay, good. However, deeper than that, we learn that besides the physical vitamins that are in it, there's an actual inner life force to every food. So now when you eat the food, why are you eating the food? So now the Torah teaches, if you're eating food simply because you enjoy eating, not because you're hungry, not because it's going to give you strength to do something positive with your life, but you're eating simply because it tastes good. So what you're doing at that moment is you're removing the life force from the food, and you're only connecting to the actual physical part of the food. This is the reason, actually, the deeper reason why the Rambam, right? He was a doctor. He was one of the greatest doctors who ever lived. And Jewish law comes from him, it derives from him. And he says there that every person, when they eat, they should only eat till 3/4 full. Now, even though health gurus at this point, they say the same thing, the Rambam said this 1,000 years ago. Why did the Rambam say you should only eat until you're 3/4 full and not more than that? Because he says that many more people get sick from eating too much than almost any other reason. That when you eat beyond the point of being full, that this is one of the main causes of illness, neurological, psychological, emotional, physical, from eating too much food. Rabbi Nachman himself said, because they would ask him, isn't it an issue not to eat past when you're full? Don't you have to eat all the time? And he said, as a matter of fact, that more people have died from eating too much than eating too little. So what's the inner reason for this? The reason is because of this. Food is physical, but with inside food, you have a life force. The reason why Hashem created that food for you is to get the life force from the food. That's going to make you feel energized. That's going to make you feel happy. That's going to make you feel life. However, you'll notice when you eat too much, how do you feel after? You feel tired. You feel lethargic. You feel cranky. Why? So they'll tell you it's because you ate too much. However, according to the deepest wisdom of Torah and of Kabbalah, they explain something amazing. Listen to this. When you eat food, okay, every bite that you have until the point that you're full, that food is giving you life force. You're getting life force from that food, physical and spiritual. However, at the moment that you continue to eat beyond the point of being full, which everyone here knows all about that, and me more than anybody, okay? What happens is you're no longer getting life force from that food, but that the food is actually now deriving life force from you. Meaning the food that's in your stomach, that's beyond what you actually need, now becomes what's called excess. And spiritually, whenever you have excess, that excess then actually draws life force from you instead of you drawing life force from it. This is really the essence of the concept of klipot, or external negative energies, or internal negative energies that the Torah speaks about. Rav Nachman simply calls it excess. Rav Nachman says the cause of all emotional and physical disease comes from excess, physical excess. What's the reason? The answer is this. Because when you engage with the physical world more than you need to, or you don't use it as a means to an end, you use it as an end in and of itself, which our generation knows more than anybody else, because we are all driven by physical pleasure, more so than any other generation in history, that the whole reason why we do anything is because it feels good. So now it's interesting because all the mental health community is concerned and trying to figure out, why are depression rates so high? Why is anxiety so high? Why is psychiatric meds at an all-time high? Why are people in America, even though they have the most resources for health, sicker than all the other countries? And the answer is because of what the Torah and Kabbalah teach. That physical excess is the cause of all physical and spiritual illness. So that's something that we should really think about and really consider. Now, the Torah does not advocate for it, does not encourage separation from the physical world. We are not other religions that they believe you should go into a mountain and leave your family and go meditate on a rock. We don't believe in that. The Torah teaches you should have a normal life. You should have a beautiful family. You should have a nice home. You should live in society. You should be connected to a community. However, within your physical normal life, you're supposed to be lifting it up through spirituality. Meaning you're using your physical life as a means to experience a higher self, a higher relationship, a higher quality of life. What's a mashal? What's a way to understand this? If anybody here plays basketball, or anybody knows what basketball is, okay? How does it work? Every single one of us has a shooting hand. And every one of us has a hand that assists the shooting hand. Now, even though I don't shoot the right way, and therefore I shoot with both hands, that's not how they teach you to shoot. They teach you to shoot, you use one hand as your dominant hand, and the other hand just holds the ball for you. And you shoot with the shooting hand. How does that work? So now, because you are dominant with one hand, it's good for you to shoot with that hand. However, you can't hold it with that one hand. You need your other hand to keep it in place. Now, you can't shoot with that other hand, because if you do, you're going to miss. Not only are you going to miss, you're going to be terrible at basketball. So the Torah teaches the same concept applies in our lives. Your inner essence, and the inner essence of everything that you do, the higher purpose for whatever you do anything for, whether it's eating, whether it's drinking, whether it's relations with your spouse, whether it is talking to a friend, whether it is playing a game, whatever it is that you do in your life, the Torah teaches you, look for a higher purpose within what you're doing. Don't eat for the sake of eating, eat to be healthy. Don't play a game just because it's fun. Play a game because it gives you a clear mind, so now you can have a good relationship with your family, right? Have an inner reason for why you're doing what you're doing. Have a higher reason. That's called your shooting hand. It's the reason why you're doing anything. And then use the activity, the physical experience, to assist you in achieving it. That I'm going to go eat now so that I can get life force from this food so that I can now do all the things I want to do with my life. That's called shooting with your right hand, if you're righty. But what do we do? What is everybody in this generation doing? What did I do my whole life growing up? I ate only because it tastes good. And what happens as a result of that? I'm comatose the whole day because I'm so tired after eating. What's the reason for that? It's not because your stomach is full. That's only the physical reason why. It's because I am using my left hand to shoot. That whole experience of eating is only to access something deeper within the eating, the life force you get from it. It's not just because it tastes good. But what our whole generation does is we separated the physical from the life force of it. And now in everything in our life, whether it has to do with sex, or it has to do with food, or it has to do with drinks, or it has to do with anything, we are doing it for the pleasure itself alone. And as a result of this, we're not experiencing any of the blessing from any of it. Not from our intimate relations, not from our eating, not from our drinking, not from our connection with our friends and family, because we're not tapping into the soul of any of those events or any of those circumstances. We're only eating from the peel of it. And that makes you sick. That makes you very unhealthy. And there are many people who have diseases. They go to doctors. Now doctors don't know why they have these diseases. And the Torah teaches it's because they eat too much. Now, if you went to a doctor, they would think you're going to a holistic doctor. You should stop seeing him. There's no proof for that. See how you feel. Eat till you're 3/4 full. Do that for a week. See how you feel. You'll probably start to get healthier right away. Okay? There's a very deep connection between what you eat and how you feel. Okay? We're getting clued into that now, but the Torah has known about this for thousands of years. That's just one example, okay? But when you are tapped into an inner reason for why ever you do anything, that's called being a tzaddik in that situation. When I'm not eating simply for the pleasure of it, but because I want the life force from the food to go do something positive with my life, that's called being a tzaddik. When I am in relationships with my spouse, and I'm not just doing it for the pleasure, but because I want an intimate connection with my spouse, because I want to know them more than I can when we're separate, so that we can bring life into the world, that's called experiencing the soul of that situation. But our generation doesn't know anything about this. The reason why divorce rates are sky high, like they've never been seen before, is because we're only connecting as bodies. We're not connecting as souls. Nobody knows their spouse. We know we have the same interests. We know we have similar things that we do. But do I know this person at all? Can I tell you who this person really is? We don't know. And then what happens is, when the other person isn't into the same physical things we are anymore, we think we made a mistake, so we get divorced. Because the love is not real. It's based on something external. So we see that within society, because of our lackings in this area, even though it's championed by societies, this is the only way to live, what else would you do? This is causing the degradation of all aspects of society, both within relationships, within physical health, within spiritual connection to Hashem. You can't see Hashem when you're living like this. The reason why nobody experiences God in their life is not because Hashem is not there. It's because we're removing him from our life, because we're removing the inner essence of everything in our life. People think God is like something up in the clouds. It's not God. Hashem is the inner reality of everything. But when you are removing the inner reality of everything from your life, and you're not being a tzaddik, so you can't experience Hashem, because you're only experiencing the body. You're not experiencing the soul. And the body conceals Hashem. He doesn't reveal him. This is why the beginning of redemption for all of us in any aspect of our life, whether it's for physical health or emotional health or psychological health or within relationships, whatever it is, or as a society, we want to have peace. We want to have connection. We want to get along. The first step is to turn away from negativity. What's the negativity that the Torah is speaking about? Only focusing on the outside. The exact thing that our entire generation is only busy with. The only thing we're busy with is the outside. This is why so many people, especially my age and younger, they're going to school for 4 years, 6 years, 8 years. They get the job and the thing they wanted. They find a girlfriend. They live with them. And they wonder to themselves, is this all there is in life? Is that it? This is what I was told. This is the greatest part of life. This is it. This is what my parents dreamed of. They were poor growing up. They didn't have anything. They ended up being successful. They gave us this opportunity. And we actually got to taste that fruit. And that fruit is weak. And now people, they don't turn to spirituality. They turn to things that actually bring them deeper into the negativity. And they wonder why they're experiencing all of these different things. And the answer is because when you only connect to the outer reality, you're cutting yourself off from the life force of that thing. The Torah teaches that every single Jew has a part of them that's called Tzaddik, or for a woman, Tzaddikah. And the Torah teaches every one of us every day has to make a concerted effort to connect to this part of ourselves. That means whenever I do a physical activity, I first have in mind to do it for a higher purpose, whether it's spiritual or physical, whether it's psychological or emotional. And when you do that, you're actually tapping into Hashem, into godliness. And that itself is what gives you health. That's what gives you peace. That's what gives you joy. That's called being tzaddik. And that step is necessary for Mashiach Ben David next week to take place, for you to experience a complete redemption, because that step doesn't transform your life. It only is the beginning of experiencing mending. The beginning of tikkun, of rectification, is turning away from this. Now, the essence of this, according to Torah and Chassidut, is sexuality. Specifically in the realm of sexuality, which we know in our generation, you know, this is unheard of, and this is considered puritanic, and I know that because I grew up thinking it was crazy. I remember when I was becoming Balei Tshuva, even before that, and I was going to Jewish people's homes for the first time who were observant, and I saw that they had things about not wasting seed, and I was like, this is insane. Doctors say it causes prostate cancer if you don't. And they made me close it. They're like, don't look at that. You're not ready for that. Okay. Now, when you get into the deeper teachings, the most mystical teachings, the inner essence of Torah, they're busy with this thing about sexuality. Why? Because the sexual act is not just the most powerful physical act, it's the most powerful spiritual act. When you have sexual relations for good reasons, whether it is to have closeness with your spouse, to know them more, to have greater intimacy, whether it is to experience a deeper attachment to something that's inner, that's something that's spiritual, that can give you the greatest revelations in your life of peace, of love, of blessing, of truth. But when we just do it for physical reasons alone, which is the only thing anybody knows now, This is what is the cause of all negativity. All negativity. And the concept of a tzaddik at its essence is this specific area. Rav Nachman speaks more about this than any other rabbi that you will see. He has more literature on this. He has more advice about it. This is something that was completely unheard of to me and has been the greatest transition of my life. I remember when I became Baal Tshuva, people asked me, what has been the hardest part for you? Is it eating kosher? I said, that has been the easiest part. You'd be shocked. This is not hard at all. There's so many things that are harder than that. This is not that. The hardest thing, and Rav Nachman himself says this, is to be a tzaddik. That means to extricate yourself from things that are barriers to you living a good life. And it's so hard. It's so hard not to hang out with friends who are not good influences. It's so hard not to watch news that even though it's making you feel sad and anxious, but what else is there to do? So I'm going to watch it. And then the rest of the day, you're worried and you're frantic. And then that's pouring out into your life. But how can I stop watching? Would it be normal to stop watching the news? How are you going to stop watching the news? And then what do the news stations do? They increase the intensity and the extremeness of what they're talking about. Then you have to watch more and more. And if you don't watch all that news, what happens to you? You're considered ignorant. And in truth, there's no way to watch news all day and to be happy. Because all they're showing you is the worst things that are going on. And it's all they're talking about. When there's so many beautiful, amazing things that are happening. We're having progress in areas we've never even heard of before. You never heard about that on the news. All you're hearing about is the fact that this coronavirus is causing the whole world to experience unbelievable chaos and destruction. And even within the coronavirus, there's been positive things. You have to stay home with your family and to actually connect, not just in a superficial way. You have to talk to your spouse. You have to hang out with your kids. That's great. Now, nobody thinks that's good because we're all avoiding it. But in truth, Hashem understands that's what life is all about. These things that we think are the big things are the small things. The real things is those relationships. The real things is the love. The real things is the connection. To try and become your best self. The Torah teaches very clearly that Paro, the leader of Mitzrayim, the reason his name is Paro comes from the word to distract. His whole quality is to distract you. What is he trying to distract you from? Your real self. Paro is not just a person, he's society. When you live in a society which is constantly feeding you messages about what's good for you, about what's normal, right? I'm not going to get political because I'm not into that, and it has no pertinence to what we're talking about. But just as an example, when you grow up in America, you either grow up secular and liberal, or you grow up conservative and right-wing. This is not everybody, but this is usually, often, observant Jews, they grow up conservative and right-wing because a lot of those practical beliefs fit in line with some of the practical beliefs of the Torah, some of the more important ones. However, when you grow up as a secular Jew, so we grow up usually connecting more to liberal or democratic points of view from when it comes to politics. Now, I've been able to see both sides because I grew up like that, and now I'm seeing that. And it's unbelievable, and it's very scary how everybody thinks they're right. That when you go into like a home that I grew up in, and the way that we watch, that we only watch CNN or we only watch NBC, and we think that for sure we're right, and that Republicans are insane, and they're destroying the country, and Republicans are doing the same thing. They're watching Fox News, and they're thinking that liberal Democrats are literally insane, and they're destroying the country. So whatever way you look at it, you're being fed messages. And even though we all think that we're free, we're not free. Every single thing that you hear, every newspaper article has an agenda. Every Facebook article, every single message you get about anything, there is an organization or there is money going involved, and there is an agenda, even if it's a positive one, but there is an agenda. And it's affecting us. What's the point? Don't think that you're free from influence. Don't think that you're left to your own devices. You're not. The Torah teaches there's something called paro, which is an influence in society, not just within a person, which is distracting you from achieving who you are. Now, to be a tzaddik, this week, we have a special ability to connect to this koach, this energy of achieving who we really are. That like Yosef, that he was in the worst possible situations in a country that was furthest away, not physically, but spiritually from who he believed he was. That went completely against everything that he believed, and he maintained his integrity, and he maintained his virtue, and he actually pursued Hashem, and he pursued his highest self even within that place, and he achieved it in that place, which is the beauty of being outside of the land of Israel, that in some ways you can actually achieve a higher thing outside, which is Yosef. That's us now. So turning away from negativity means understanding you have many influences in your life. Just practically, think to yourself, which of these things make me happy? Which of these things don't make me happy? How many of you watch the news and you feel scared after? How many of you watch the news and you feel sad after? Or whatever the situation is, whatever the thing is, how many of you talk to a friend and that friend, every single time you speak to her or him, you feel worse after? So now you think, I should keep talking to them. Or you think I should keep listening to that because what else is there to do? And the Torah says, don't do that. This is making you feel bad. This is making you feel sad. Why would you do anything that's making you feel bad? You should only do things that are connecting you to good. So therefore, the first step is to turn away from negative things. And what does negativity mean in its essence again? It means to turn away from doing things only for superficial reasons, to have a higher reason why you do it. That's called being a tzaddik. This is the special ability we have this week to connect to this. Now, I'm just going to give 3 practical ways to actually do this week, things to work on, things to write down, things to meditate on, things to talk to Hashem about, trying to implement in your life, and then we'll take questions. I know this class is a little bit longer than usual because it's one of the most important topics, okay? We haven't even scratched the surface of it. I'm just trying to give you a basic introduction to the concept of tzaddik, of yesod, of the Brit, of what we can work on this week, okay? 3 practical ways to actually connect to your inner self, to your inner relationships, to the inner part of your physical experiences is like this. Number 1, to learn Chassidut. What we teach every night from Sunday to Thursday night, that's called Chassidut. Chassidut takes all of the deepest Kabbalistic secrets of the Torah and makes it practical for you. Meaning it takes the inner wisdom, the deepest inner spiritual wisdom of life, and it draws it down for you in a way that you can not only understand it, but you can actually use it to transform your life. Where do we see that this has to do with Yosef? How do we know? Because we're going to say, how do you know David's not making that up? Because he happens to be interested in it. He happens to love Chassidut, and it changed his life. How do we know that Yosef himself was, so to speak, learning Chassidut? So we know that when Yosef was being seduced by the master's wife, and it was at the moment that he was about to give in, so the Midrash says very clearly, his father's face was pictured in his mind, meaning as he was about to actually follow through with the act and to go against everything he believed in, but he just couldn't hold on anymore. He had nothing else to do and to live for was whatever this experience was going to be. At least I would have some gratification now. And his father's face popped up into his mind. Now, on a simple level, it was his dad taught him not to do things like this, so he ended up not doing it, but it's much deeper than that. Because the Torah teaches that anything's face is its essence. When Yaakov's face popped up into Joseph's head, meaning Jacob's face popped up into Joseph's head, Jacob represents the Torah. And Jacob's face represents the essence of Torah, meaning Chassidut. That what popped up in Joseph's head that allowed him to be able to overcome this sexual test of doing something sexually with no other positive inner reason for doing it besides the pleasure, his father's face popped up in his head, meaning he was meditating on the inner dimension of spirituality. Because that's the only thing that allows you not only to overcome that temptation, but to actually see why it's a great thing to achieve a deeper reason for doing what you're doing. These teachings that we're talking about, they don't just tell you not to do things. They tell you why it's so beautiful. They tell you what you have to look forward to as a result of that. The happiness, the joy, the peace in your life. That all comes Chassidut, which was originated by the Baal Shem Tov. and which Rabbi Nachman took all the way for us. And these are the teachings that we do. So if you are interested in experiencing all of these things, whether it's peace or blessing or health in your life, the only way to achieve that is by connecting to the tzaddik within you. And the only way to follow through and not to cave in when it actually comes down to the moment is to picture Yaakov's mind, Yaakov in your mind, meaning that you are learning the inner wisdom of the Torah, the deepest secrets of the Torah, which are practical. That's called Chassidut. So we're doing that 5 days a week, and you can do that on your own time as well. That's one practical piece of advice. If you're not learning Chassidut at all, you never heard of it, I highly suggest, and it's really enjoyable. It's not like learning Gemara. It's not like learning Jewish law. It is beautiful. It is really mamash beautiful. And it's very practical as well. Okay, so we do this every night. There's women's classes every Wednesday. There is men's and women's every Sunday. And then we do just for men Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. So you guys have whenever you want, at least from us, and for wherever you want, okay? The schedule can go up and you guys can check it out. That's one. Number two, what else did Yosef do that allowed him to be a tzaddik in Mitzrayim? He was happy. This is such an important thing, and this is something that Rabbi Nachman drives all the way to the extreme. But he says we need to. When people think of Breslovers, when they think of Breslov Chassidut, they think about the fact that you always have to be happy. Now, even though everybody would love to be happy all the time, but we don't know how to, so we go to see therapists and we go to see psychiatrists, and when we read psychology self-help books, and we try to hear from people who sound like they're happy, or we try to emulate celebrities or people that we see that they look good, right? But the truth is that Rabbi Nachman has all the answers on how to be happy. And I'm not just telling you that. I have nothing to gain from this. I'm telling you, mamash, that the people who learn Rabbi Nachman's Torah, they are happy. And it's not just because they're forcing themselves to be happy, it's because they're actually happy. What's the reason? Rabbi Nachman was not just a Hasidic master. He was not just a spiritual guru. He was a psychological, emotional doctor. Anybody who learns Rabbi Nachman's wisdom is going to come out immediately thinking, this sounds like he is a psychologist. He was so in tune with things that we are only starting to pick up on now 200 years later, that he knew only in a shtetl in Ukraine, in a little small city, and he only lived until 38 years old, that there's no way to believe or to even imagine that a person could understand all these things simply because he was working on himself his whole life and trying to become his greatest self. And he comes down with very practical ways of how to be happy all the time. It's very, very, very important to be happy. Why? Not just because of your emotional state, which is also, but Rabbi Nachman says your ability to achieve the purpose of your life depends on you being happy. You're not going to be able to be confronted with tests and obstacles in your life and to overcome them without being happy. You're not going to be able to, let's say, for instance, I know that for me, something that I struggle with, that whenever I'm sad, whenever I'm worried, I eat. Okay, this is something that I'm working a lot on. So what's the reason I'm eating? The reason is, or overeating, let's say. The reason is because I deal with sadness. So let's say I didn't get sad, then I wouldn't overeat. So in fact, by being happy, you actually nip the problem in the bud to begin with. You don't even have to face the test because you're happy. That's why Rabbi Nachman says every Jew has to make sure he's happy at all times, no matter what. Now, obviously that sounds great, and everybody's looking for how to do that. Rabbi Nachman actually teaches how to do that, okay? So in these classes, we're going to learn more and more practical pieces of advice of how to not only force yourself to be happy, but to actually always be happy. That's number two. You need to make sure you're learning every day and practicing how to be happy. Third and final step, what was Yosef doing? The Midrash explains every single time that people saw him, he was speaking about Hashem. Meaning Hashem was coming out of his mouth. Words of Hashem. Sorry, 1 second. Lenore. Ima. Lenore. Lenore. Sorry, my daughter's crying and I can't get her right now to get him. I always go and get her, sorry. Okay, so the final thing is that Yosef was always talking about Hashem, meaning that the Midrash explains that when they'd ask him to go get something when he was a slave, he would say, Hashem, go help me get this thing. Even though he just has to go get the coffee. What are you asking Hashem for? But because he was constantly talking to Hashem, the Torah teaches as a result of that, he was able to constantly connect to his true self. He never lost sight of it. And Rav Nachman says this explicitly, that the only way, especially in a generation and in a culture where everything goes against what the Torah teaches, not just in terms of dogma, forget about dogma, what's good for you, what's beneficial, what causes health and peace and joy in your life, how do you actually maintain what you want to be? Or let's say not even spiritually. How many days do you wake up and you have dreams about what you like to do? I would love to succeed and make a business. I would love to succeed and become a musician. I want to become an actor. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to be a planter. I want to be a cook. And how many of us actually follow through with those things? We often don't. We almost always don't. What's the reason for that? Because Pharaoh, he distracts. The Yetzer Hara, the negative forces in the world, only want to distract you from becoming who you were created to be, and for you to achieve what you want to be. What's the point that Rav Nachman says every day you have to talk to Hashem for an hour a day? Because it's the only way to keep in mind, what do you want to do with your life? What priorities do you have in your life? Just as a practical example, and again, I really don't think anything of myself. I think, not that I think that I'm a bad person, I think I'm a good person, but there's nothing about me that's extraordinary, that's different than anybody listening to the class, okay? We're all in the same boat together. We all have positives, we all have struggles, good. Within the last year, I've been able to do so much more than I've been able to do my whole life. Not just spiritually, also physically. Whether it's having a bigger family, whether it's trying to make more money to support my family, whether it's creating an organization, whether it's increasing in my trying to make my relationships better with my wife and with my kids and everything that I'm doing. And what's the reason I'm able to do that? It's only because I take an hour every day to myself away from distraction and to talk to Hashem and say to Hashem, this is important to me. It's important to me that I don't end up at the end of my life saying, what if? That I could have. I don't even mind not succeeding in anything I do, as long as I could say at the end that I tried. But if every day I have dreams and I never end up doing any of it, I'm going to feel terrible about it. I'm not going to feel good about that. Hibodedut, the reason why, if you go to any Breslauer, whether you like listening to Gedalia Fenster, whether you've heard any Breslov lecturers and you're inspired by them, they'll all tell you the same thing. What is the key to manifesting your dreams in your life? What is the key to becoming a tzaddik or a tzaddikah, to lifting up your physical and your spiritual life? They're going to tell you it's talking to Hashem for an hour a day. Now, there's many reasons for that, but according to this class, the practical reason is because you're not distracted then. And therefore, you can keep in your mind what is important in your life. Because when you don't, you never actually pursue what you always want to do. So these are the three practical means. Again, how do you become a tzaddik? Like Yosef did. One, he had his father's face in his mind, meaning he was meditating on the deeper essence of spirituality. That comes with Chassidut. Those are these teachings that we teach at night. Then you have joy, that you need to make sure you're happy no matter what. That Rav Nachman says, if a thought comes into your mind and it makes you sad, stop thinking about it. We think we don't have control of that. When you start to learn Rabbi Nachman's teachings, you'll be shocked at how much control you have over your thoughts. Okay? So to make sure that you're happy at all times, Rav Nachman says, even if you have to act foolish, even if you have to sing or dance or do crazy things that obviously not against the Torah, not against society's laws, but just things that maybe are considered foolish. Rav Nachman says you have to do it if you need to make sure that you're happy, whatever it takes to be happy. Because if you're happy, you can do anything. And if you're not happy, you can't do anything. And I know this firsthand, okay? And I'm sure everybody here listening also has experienced that to some extent in their life. Number 3 is that you need to have a time every day that you talk to Hashem. Besides the deeper spiritual reasons. Because when you speak to Hashem about what's important in your life, you don't forget it. And if you don't forget it, then you pursue it. And if you pursue it, then you do it. Rav Nachman says free will is very easy. When you want to do something, you'll do it. And when you don't want to do something, you won't do it. That's how free will works. So if that's the case, how come I've never accomplished any of the things I've always wanted to? And the answer is because you do not have a time every day that you can think clearly, because you're constantly besieged by messages of media, of society, even in conversations with friends and family, which Rav Nachman and Torah say is essential and very important, but still, you can't lose track of who you are, and you can't lose track of your soul. You can't lose track of what you're here for. And even on a physical level, what do I want to do with my life? What would I like to accomplish? You can't lose track of these things. There's a reason you have these dreams. Hashem implants them inside of you. You come here to do this. Okay, so everybody has what to work on, I hope, this week. Next week will be the very last week of the Sfirat HaOmer, where we're going to work on the last quality of the soul, which has to do with Emunah, which has to do with faith, which has to do with prayer. That is a very, very important class, as important as this one. This whole class was to help you to connect to and to tap into your first Redeemer, your Mashiach Ben Yosef, the beginning of your redemption from all issues in your life. That is to turn away from negativity and through these means that we spoke about. Next week, we're going to learn how to actually create change, how to transform all negativity, all darkness to light. That's the second stage, and that can only be done. Mashiach Ben David, can only be accessed to tefillah, prayer, speech, can only have its power when you first do this thing that we're speaking about now. Before we have any questions, I just want to make an announcement. Rav Chaim Kramer, this should be a refuah shlema for him. His name is Chaim Menachem Ben Leah. He's the whole reason that these classes are going up from Breslov Research Institute. He's the whole reason we have these teachings in English, even though they're normally only in Hebrew and in Yiddish. And he is the cause of all these teachings spread to the English-speaking world. He is not well right now. He had the coronavirus. He survived it, thank God, in his early 70s. And it's not with him anymore. However, it had a tremendous effect on his health. And he's going to take time to recover. And he's going to need a lot of prayers, and he's going to need a lot of help, okay? So this class should be for him. And as well, just to add to that for us, we need to have a schedule, okay? It's not just in physical life that you have a schedule. You also need a schedule in your spiritual life, your inner life. You need to have a schedule for that. They say that when you get up to Shemayim after your life is over, one of the questions they ask you is, did you make a schedule for learning the truth, about learning who you really are? Did you have a schedule for that? Just like you had a schedule for work. So we have these classes every night. The schedule is like this again. Sunday night is for men and women. Monday, Tuesday is for men. Wednesday is just for women. Thursday is for men again. And we do this every week like this right now. This is the schedule right now. If you have no other time that you have in your day, I truly believe, and I'm not just saying this, that the greatest impact you can have in your life is from Chassidut, is from Rabbi Nachman's teaching. So if nothing else, and at least in addition to whatever else you're doing, this is a great point to grow in your life, both spiritually and physically, okay? For anybody who needs the schedule, email us at sionbreslovproject@gmail.com and wants to know when the classes are and wants to be updated with the classes and to be added on the listserv. And we have a lot of things planned, okay? Number 2, people have been texting me and asking me on the bottom about if there's any place to donate. So there's something called a quick chase pay. I'm not exactly sure how these things work. I'm not so expert in technology anymore. But all you have to do is put in tzionbreslovproject@gmail.com into quick chase pay, and you can donate anything you want there if you want to. Okay. What's the reason for that? So we can keep doing the classes, so that we can expand the classes, so we can have more programs. We have big plans for this. We just started 2 weeks ago, okay? This is just the beginning. We hope that this becomes Bezrat Hashem International at some point. So really, we have very, very big plans, and everybody who's involved is motivated for inner reasons. Nobody is doing this for money, I promise you. And we really believe these teachings can not just help the Jewish people, but they can really save the world. So any questions before we end the night about how to practically bring these teachings into your life? And don't be shy. You don't learn if you don't ask. Yes, Ariel, go ahead, ask. Okay.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Cool. Well, here's my question. It's a two-parter, so I'll be quick. When you read Tikkun Klali, when you do the first one, it makes reference to those for the tzaddikim that lie in the earth.
Right.
And also it talks about how you're not going to offer libations of blood.
Right.
Now, when it talks about the tzaddikim that lie in the earth, and you said that Yosef HaTzaddik, his prison cell was literally underground in the earth, is it making reference to him being in prison?
That's a great question. That's an interesting insight. I have to think about that. I never heard that before. What it means on a simple level, and Rabbi Nachman stresses this, because the Zohar talks a lot about it.
Okay.
That the tzaddikim that have passed away, the greatest Jews that have ever lived, that have passed away, whether they're your grandparents or your great-grandparents, your ancestors,
okay,
they are not done with their work. In fact, when they get above, when their physical life passes, they continue to pray for their family and their friends to be able to achieve happiness in their life, so far as the Zohar says, which is the classical mystical text of the Torah, that if not for their prayers, the world couldn't continue to exist. How much they're praying for us, okay? So therefore, Rav Nachman teaches, and the reason why it's so important is because you need to be connected to a tzaddik in order to achieve the tzaddik within you. Meaning, just like on a simple level, to be able to become a great basketball player, you would need a great coach who also knows how to play basketball. So it's the same thing in the spiritual world. If you want to become a master of your psychological, emotional, spiritual relationship life, you need a master of those things. So that's called a tzaddik. And those tzaddikim who are in the earth, people who have passed away, they actually have more influence when they're not here than even when they're here. So that's the simple understanding of that. So good question, though.
Okay, and so the last part is when you talk about the klipa and the peri, or the free rather, a lot of the times Yosef, they always say that he's a tzaddik because he refused the sexual advances of Potiphar. A lot of the times, the one thing that's paramount to sex is violence. He also didn't take revenge on his brothers.
True, very good.
And he had several opportunities to do so. So why is it so much him turning down? Exactly.
Great question. The reason is because Rav Nachman says the energy that comes from sexual intimacy is actually the root energy of all action. So therefore, whether it's murder or whether it's theft or whether it's any negative thing, which is for most countries at this point against the law, or anything that we know is a negative, something that's getting in the way of your life.
That's always the motivator.
The actual inner spiritual motivator is sexuality. Okay. And Rav Nachman speaks about this. So that's the real reason why, because by saying he's a tzaddik in that area, it means he was a tzaddik in all areas.
Okay, I have another part, but I'll send it to you. I don't want to take up any more time.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions? It looks like there's some on the bottom until you guys ask, and they're more about donations and things like that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do you know the gematria for Yesod?
Yes. Oh, Yesod? Let's do it together. You have a Yud, that's 10. You have a Samach, that's 60, so that's 70. You have a Vav, that is 6, that's 76. And you have a Dalet, that's 4, that's 80.
Amen. 80, okay? Wow.
Which is gematria peh, the mouth. And actually, the Yesod has a lot to do with the mouth as well. So Bezrat Hashem, we're going to get to speak about it in the future. How to be a tzaddik has a lot to do with the mouth. Okay? Good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Practical questions. How to bring this into your life. Did anybody come up with anything? Anyone want to text it in or anything? Don't be shy.
Rabbi. Yes, question is, you was talking about the food, one of the practical way, meaning that you was talking about that we have to think about more of eating, not for just physical pleasure, but
right.
How do you usually bring it to the practical?
Unsuccessfully. I'm working on it though. But I'll tell you like this. In the world now, there is something called mindful eating. So this is not something that we have come upon. In fact, Rabbi Nachman spoke about mindful eating 210 years ago and how important it is, not just for physical reasons, but for spiritual reasons. So one is on a very simple level, have in mind why you're eating, okay? If the reason you're eating is for something else, meaning I'm eating for energy, I'm eating for life force, I'm eating so I have the koach, the strength to do something else, I'm eating because I want to connect to something deeper right now. So all of that is great. Now, what do we usually do is we eat just because we're hungry. So that's how it starts. But then what ends up happening is we then end up eating a lot more than that, or we end up eating when we're not even hungry. So then what happens is the food, like we just said, not only are you not getting life force from the food, it actually starts to get life force from you, and that's why you get tired after, okay? So therefore, what's something to have in mind? Before you take a bite, just quickly say to yourself, think to yourself, why am I eating? And when you take the bite, don't just eat. Enjoy the food and be there in the moment. Don't just keep eating without looking and then not getting satiated, not getting full, because the Gemara teaches part of the reason why you don't get full is because you don't see what you're eating. To be able to see is part of what makes you full. So even all of these things, just that's on a more practical level. Even in society these days, this is something that they're teaching everybody to do, okay? So this is not even a Jewish chidush anymore. This isn't even a Torah novelty. The modern secular world is busy with this concept of mindful eating. However, on a deeper spiritual level, what is something to keep in mind? So everybody, please just try and listen and digest what I'm about to say before you come to any conclusions, okay? The Torah and the Zohar and Kabbalah explain that everything in this world has a soul, okay? Just like you have a soul and that's your essence, every piece of food has a soul. Every vegetable has a soul. Every rock has a soul. Everything has a soul, okay? Now, it's taught, and the Arizal speaks a lot about this, and Rabbi Nachman obviously is busy with this as a result. When you eat food, you are actually elevating the soul of the food. Now, the soul of the food is not just the soul of the food, but it's actually someone else's soul. And that soul has now been reincarnated, because there's a concept in the Torah called reincarnation, that the souls of things that have lived in the past continue to be reincarnated into the world. And depending on what you need as a soul in order to experience wholeness forever, you come back as a different thing. Sometimes you come back as a person. Sometimes you come back as a tree. Sometimes you come back as a plant. Sometimes you come back as food. So every single time that you eat something or drink something, even water, when you make a bracha on the food, what's the reason you're making the bracha? Because it's supposed to be making you mindful of what you're about to eat has a neshama in it, has a soul in it. And that soul, when you make the bracha or when you eat mindfully, that actually causes that neshama, that soul, to actually elevate and to reach its tikkun. So this is a deeper spiritual concept to meditate on when you're eating. Just to understand that when you're eating, you're not just eating food, that everything that you interact with in the physical world has a soul. And the entire reason why you happen to interact with whatever you're interacting with is not just because you happen to be hungry for a steak tonight, but because that steak needs you to eat it and to eat mindfully and to make a bracha over it in order to have a tikkun for the neshama, the soul that's in that food. That's the whole reason why you're actually hungry for that specific food. That's the inner reason why. But the only way to actually do that is to meditate on it first. So have just simply in mind that this food has a neshama, just like I have a neshama, as a soul. And when I eat this food mindfully, it causes that soul to reach wholeness, and it reaches the purpose of its existence. Okay? Is that understood?
That's great. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
You're welcome. And any other last questions?
Hi, David. How are you?
Great, Baruch Hashem. How are you?
This is Ariel from J-Wave.
Hey, Ariel. How you doing?
Nothing much. How are you?
Great.
So, as you were explaining about, I know that every food and everything that we consume, it has a neshama. Now, once we get reincarnated, do we feel any like pain or any, like if something like touches us, or do we feel or do we remember exactly how or what happened?
That's a great question.
Or
So the
that's like,
Arizal speaks. No, this is a great question. The Arizal, who's the greatest mystic that ever lived, he actually talks a lot about this. And he explains that human beings, when they are reincarnated and they come back into this life, let's say as Jason or Michael or Aaron or Seth or whatever your name is, that as soon as you come out of the womb, you forget all of your previous reincarnations, okay? You don't remember what happened to you in prior incarnations in your life, even though it's deeply affecting your current life, and it's the whole reason you're here. And the whole reason for that is so that you can spend your life remembering. That's the inner reason, actually, why when a person learns something new, and Rabbi Akiva Tat speaks about this a lot, when you learn something new, it doesn't feel like you learned something new. It feels like you're remembering something that you forgot. The reason for that is because that's actually what's happening. You already learned everything before, and now you come back into this world, and you have a whole lifetime to remember those things, okay? However, the Arizal teaches that even though we forgot, people forget why they were here in the past or what happened in their past lives, everything else in the world knows why they were here before. That every vegetable and every fruit and every tree and every plant that is living, even though it doesn't have a physical mind or a brain, its soul, which is in it, has complete awareness of the reason that it's here, what happened to it in a past life, and why it came back as the thing that it did, and what it needs to experience wholeness.
so even like a object or like food that we consume, that neshama kind of like remembers.
Yes, yes, it knows exactly why it's here and why it's sitting on your table for you about to eat it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
The other day, my son asked me, so we always, when we don't correct our soul in the past, we come back, right?
Yes.
Come back until we fix ourselves, and then we go up in heaven, they say. So when Mashiach comes, what soul comes back? Like they say, they all they all get up and go to Israel, but what soul, since you've been so many people, how does that work?
That's a great question. I had that same question. Okay, I had the same question. I've heard it from multiple people as well. So we're in good company, thank God. So I'll tell you my limited understanding of it, and then I'll tell you I don't know. Okay. So my limited understanding is like this. First of all, every reincarnation that you come for is for a different reason. That even though in the end, it's to have and to experience complete wholeness of self, which you're going to experience forever, every time you come back down to this world, it's for a different reason. It is to complete a different part of yourself. Part of the reason why, let's say, for instance, some people struggle with sadness while other people don't, is because in a past life, they've already worked on and achieved being happy. Whereas another person might get angry very easily, where you may not. And the reason is because you have actually fixed that in a past life. And that's why you still have it now, because you still have to work on that part of yourself, okay? Now, every time you come back down, it is for usually one specific reason why, to work on one thing, and then you usually come back again. The majority of souls, and almost everybody listening to this class, if not all of us, has been here multiple times according to Kabbalah. Now, which one do you come up as the end then? Because and we know that according to the Torah, there's something called Tchiyat HaMeitim, which is that everybody who ever lived, because life never really dies, so what happens to everybody? If we know that people physically die, so what happens to them? So the answer is they don't actually die. They just move. Because anything that lives can never die. Even according to science, life can't die. Life continues to live and death continues to die. So when a person dies, he doesn't really die. His physical body, which was always dead, loses its life force, which is the soul within it. And that soul continues to live and as real as a state of existence as it is here, if not more so. And then at the end, we learn according to the Torah and according to Kabbalah that all of those souls will come back in their bodies and will live the rest of existence like that all together. Okay, so you are going to see your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your great-great-grandparents, and we're going to see everybody. Now the question is, how do we do that if you keep coming back? Which one do you come back as? That was the question you asked. I had the same question. The answer is like this. The first time that you came here, you came as a one collective soul. Okay, you came as, let's say, a big soul. The next time that you come back as a spark of that soul. Meaning who you are now is not the root of your soul, it is a spark of that soul. And every single time that you come back, it is another spark of that original soul. Meaning it's possible for you to come back in all reincarnations because they all had different bodies and they're all sparks of a soul. So therefore you can theoretically come back as all of them.
Is that another reason why a person should connect to the Tzaddik? Because he's the full embodiment of his soul, and therefore whenever you're connecting to him, you're kind of like fixing all parts of your soul.
Nice, Benny. Great chiddush.
I
I didn't see it explicitly, but that sounds nice. That sounds good. That sounds emet, but I have to look more into it. So anyway, the answer is I don't know, but what I told you I did know. So Bezrat Hashem, we should ask Hashem. He should give us an answer to that question because I have the same question. Any other questions before we end up?
I have a question.
Okay.
Since you spoke about a little bit about sexual immorality, besides Tikkun HaKlali, what can rectify that?
Okay, so good question. That's exactly what we spoke about tonight. Okay, so one thing that she just mentioned and has been mentioned already in the class, Rabbi Nachman made a specific prayer called Tikkun HaKlali, which people who are connected to Rabbi Nachman's teachings know about, which is something that Rabbi Nachman created based on different chapters of Tehillim, which is David HaMelech, King David's book, that he created all of his Hibodedut sessions and turned it into prayers. And when you say these 10 different prayers, it rectifies or it mends all errors when it comes to this sexuality, like the things that we spoke about, when we did it just for physical reasons, not for spiritual reasons, or not for deeper reasons than just the physical act. That's called Tikkun HaKlali, okay? So that's one very important thing that you can do, and everybody can do that. Men can do that, women can do that. Many breast lovers do it every single day. When you start to say it and you get fluent with the Hebrew, you could do it in 5 minutes. So it's not hard. That's one way, but there's other ways. Rabbi Nachman says when you give tzedakah, you also fix it. Why? Because what happens is when you engage in a sexual act and it's not for any deeper reason, that's called, according to the Torah, wasting seed. Meaning you have the ability to now use potential to do something the greatest possible, and you did it and you kind of wasted an opportunity to do something more special than you did. That's called wasting seed. Now, Rav Nachman says, what's the opposite of that? It is using seed correctly. So what is called seed in the Torah? Money. Money is also called seed. So when you give tzedakah, meaning you give money to a cause which you believe in, which you think helps the world, which you think helps yourself, which improves the quality of society and of life, so that's called using seed properly. And Rav Nachman says that actually fixes as well this thing as well. So those are two practical means. And for sure, Hibodedut. Again, it's always the answer, but to talk to Hashem every day, to have the time to talk to Him about these different things. So those are the 3 things I would say. And obviously, Reb Nachman speaks so much about this one topic. So as time goes on and we speak more about these things, we'll have more, not just insights, but practical ways to actually go through it. So good question. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, everybody have a great night. Thank you so much. Starting the 3rd week, Bezrat Hashem, we should go stronger and stronger. Every one of you should have an amazing week, a happy week, a peaceful week, a loving week, a coronavirus-free week that it goes away and we're able to go see our friends and family again, and that we use this time of this week not just to do what we always do, but to look for something a little bit more, to look for something a little bit deeper, to look for the tzaddik inside of and tzaddikah inside of each of us, and to try and connect to this part of ourselves. Thank you so much, guys. I'll see the men tomorrow night. I'll see the women Wednesday night. and have a great week.